On October 31st, 1978, as the clock on the tower of St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans struck midnight, heralding the arrival of All Saints' Day, the doors of the Fairmont Hotel's ballroom burst open not to let guests in, but to unleash the spirit of the purest, most concentrated madness this sinful city had ever seen. Imagine for 1 second that you are standing on the threshold of this hall. Your pupils contract from the blinding flashes of strobes slicing through the darkness like razor blades, and your eardrums vibrate from bass so powerful it feels as though your very heart stops and begins to beat to the rhythm of "Don't Stop Me Now." But what hits your nose frightens you far more than the loud music. It is a thick, nauseating, and simultaneously alluring blend of expensive French champagne spilled on sticky carpeting, the animal musk of hundreds of heated bodies, sulfur from fireworks, and the sweet chemical scent of amyl nitrite, which here, in this enclosed space, replaces oxygen. You think you've stumbled into a party celebrating the release of the new album Jazz? You think this is just another rock star binge that will get a couple of lines in Rolling Stone? Oh, how wrong you are. If Dante Alighieri lived in the 20th century and decided to write a new chapter to his Inferno, he would have copied it from what was happening that night at the Fairmont. This was not a party. This was a carefully choreographed production of Sodom and Gomorrah, paid for with a 6-figure check, where the master of ceremonies was a man the world knew as Freddie Mercury, but who on this night more closely resembled the Roman Emperor Caligula, deciding to burn Rome for a beautiful finale. Look at the center of the hall, through the smoke and feathers, through the crowd of drag queens, fire eaters, and women whose bodies are painted so thickly with gold paint that they look like living statues. You see him. Freddie. He isn't laughing. He isn't drinking. He stands on a dais, dressed in a black and white harlequin leotard, and his charcoal-lined eyes scan the crowd with frightening, surgical precision. Do you expect to see the joy of a victor? Are you looking for happiness in his gaze because he is the king of the world? But here the first loop of tension tightens. There is no happiness in his eyes. There's cold, hard calculation. He looks not like a participant in an orgy, but like a scientist conducting a dangerous experiment on the human psyche, testing how far these people can go if all prohibitions are removed, and they are given an infinite amount of alcohol and powder. It would seem we understand what is happening. Rock stars having fun. But wait, zoom in on the floor, where expensive guest shoes trample confetti and broken glass. Amidst all this debris, among lost jewelry and empty baggies, lies an object that stands out from the general picture of luxury, an object that seems so alien here that your brain refuses to take it seriously. This is that very dagger you will remember in the finale, when the puzzle pieces come together into a bloody picture. Look closely. It is not a love note or a receipt for cocaine. It is a crumpled, greasy sheet of paper with the logo of a local butcher shop. On it, in uneven handwriting, are the amount and item name: 200 pounds of raw beef liver. Delivery, service entrance, 11 p.m. You read this and feel a chill run down your spine. Why? Why, at a party serving oysters and caviar, where crystal champagne flows like a river, is 200 pounds of raw, bloody meat needed? Is it for the kitchen? For a special dish? But then why is this bill lying here in the main hall and not with the chef? This detail, a small piece of paper, creates a crack in the glossy image of the celebration. You begin to realize that the air here is saturated not only with fun, but with something animalistic, something ancient and terrible. You lift your eyes from the floor and look at the crowd again, and now, knowing about the meat, you see everything differently. You notice that the guests' laughter sounds too hysterical. You see that the dancers' movements are too jerky, as if they are puppets pulled by invisible demons. Freddie created this chaos not to have fun. He created it to drown out the silence. Ask yourself honestly, if you were offered a ticket to this hall, to this epicenter of moral decay, where no one would ever know what you did that night, would you enter? Or would you stay outside, judging them? Most of us, hand on heart, would enter. And Freddie knew that. He knew that inside everyone, even the most respectable person, sits a beast that just needs to be fed. And he prepared a feast for this beast. But while you ponder morality, a procession passes you that makes you doubt the reality of what is happening. This is not a hallucination from alcohol fumes. It's dwarves. Dozens of little people, dressed in livery, making their way through the forest of legs, of dancing giants. What are they carrying? Silver trays are fixed on their heads, tied with silk ribbons to their chins. There are no glasses on the trays. There are no snacks. There are mountains of white powder sparkling in the spotlight beams like snow in the Andes. Legend has it that cocaine for this party was ordered not in grams, but in kilograms, and that it was delivered to the hotel in garbage bags so as not to attract police attention. Do you think this is the peak of madness? That it can't go any further? You are mistaken. This is just the aperitif. The Santa Barbara effect is ready to flip your perception. Do you think these people are free? That they are enjoying the moment? Look at the face of that model in the corner, laughing with her head thrown back. Her laughter looks like crying. Look at the businessmen in expensive suits crawling on their knees, collecting spilled snow. This is not freedom. This is slavery. This is a collective psychosis conducted by a man in a harlequin suit. Freddie Mercury locked them all in the golden cage of his ambitions, and the butcher's bill on the floor is the first warning that soon, very soon, this glamorous ball will turn into a slaughterhouse where the boundaries between human and animal will be erased completely. 200 pounds of liver are already waiting in the wings somewhere backstage, and when they appear on stage, there will be no turning back for anyone. But while the music plays, while the strobes blind the eyes, no one wants to think about what will happen in the morning. After all, in New Orleans, on Halloween night of 1978, morning may never come. To understand the true scale of what was happening inside the Fairmont Hotel ballroom, you must throw out all notions of fun you have. Because the word fun implies joy, and here reigned not joy, but a heavy, sticky obsession bordering on mass psychosis. You take a step deeper into the hall, and your consciousness is immediately attacked. This is not just a party. It is a carefully planned terrorist act against morality, where the main weapon is excess. You think you've seen it all? But then, pushing past record industry moguls, a procession passes you that makes you question your own sobriety. These are the legendary drug-dealing dwarves that will be whispered about for the next 40 years. Legend has it they were hired specifically to walk through the forest of guests' legs, carrying silver trays tied with silk ribbons on their heads. But what was on those trays? Some eyewitnesses swear they saw mountains of high-grade Bolivian cocaine, piled so generously as if it were powdered sugar for donuts. Others claim this is a myth invented by the press, but the truth, as always, is far scarier and more cynical. Freddie Mercury didn't need it to be true. He needed you to believe it could be true. You look at these little people in livery making their way through the smoke and ask yourself, is this exploitation? Is this humiliation? No. In Freddie's world, this is art. This is a living installation designed to show how low human dignity can fall if the right price is paid for it. But before you can digest this picture, your attention is seized by a new nightmare unfolding in the twilight of a far corner. There, on a velvet sofa, sits a woman surrounded by a crowd of men in tuxedos, their faces distorted by a mixture of disgust and lust. What is she doing? She is smoking a cigarette. It would seem nothing special, but she isn't doing it with her mouth, and when the meaning of what is happening dawns on you, you feel the floor slip out from under your feet. This is not erotica. This is grotesque. This is a Bosch painting come to life where the human body is turned into a carnival attraction. Next to her, in a cage suspended from the ceiling, a beast man bites the heads off live chickens, and blood splatters mix with confetti falling from above. Do you think this is accidental? Do you think the organizers just went overboard with the entertainment? And here triggers the conveyor belt principle that doesn't let you exhale. Just as you think you've hit rock bottom, someone knocks from below. You see waiters who are completely naked except for bow ties, and they are serving not snacks, but room keys for upstairs, turning the hotel into a giant brothel. You see drag queens whose costumes cost more than the guests' cars, mingling with real millionaires, erasing the line between the elite and the gutter. The air is so thick with smoke, sweat, and pheromones that you could cut it with a knife, and in this fog, you begin to lose the sense of time and space. But who is behind all this? Who is the puppeteer pulling the strings of this freak show? You search for Freddie with your eyes, expecting to see him in the center of the orgy, drunk, out of control, perhaps rolling in a mountain of that very snow. And this is exactly where that Santa Barbara effect happens, flipping the meaning of the entire party on its head and shocking you. You find him. He stands on a balcony, towering over the dance floor. In his hand is a glass of crystal champagne, which he has barely touched. He is absolutely, frighteningly sober. Peer into his face. Do you see ecstasy on it? Do you see madness on it? No. You see the cold, calculating boredom of a professional checking reports. In this second, you realize a terrible thing. Freddie Mercury is not a participant in this party. He is its director. He is the circus ringmaster who released the beasts from their cages not to play with them, but to sell tickets to this spectacle. All this chaos, all these dwarves, all this blood and sperm, this is not hedonism. This is marketing. Cruel, cynical, brilliant marketing. The album Jazz, for which all this was started, received devastating reviews from critics. They called it empty. They said Queen was washed up. And what does Freddie do? He decides, if you don't want to listen to our music, you will watch our scandal. He builds a myth. He understands that music can fade from memory, but the legend of how Queen made New Orleans shudder with debauchery will live forever. He uses these people, guests, freaks, and models alike, as living props for his PR campaign. Ask yourself honestly, could you maintain such icy control while standing at the epicenter of a volcano? Could you, having access to all the vices of the world, stand aside and just watch others go mad, just so that tomorrow your name would be on the front pages of newspapers? Freddie could. He sacrificed his reputation as a serious musician to become an icon of decadence. He knew Puritan America would be horrified, but he also knew that horror sells better than delight. While you are looking at him standing on the balcony, someone from his entourage runs up to him and whispers in his ear, pointing to that very pit in the center of the hall. Remember the butcher's bill for 200 pounds of liver? That dagger? The time has come. The crowd parts, forming a circle, and you hear a sound like wet clay slapping against asphalt. It isn't clay. It is raw meat. A huge mountain of liver is dumped right onto the expensive parquet. Why? You ask this question, and your brain refuses to believe what is happening as you see two naked models jump into this pile of flesh. A wrestling match begins. Dirt, blood, meat, female bodies, everything mixes into one grotesque mass. This is the apogee. This is the moment when the party ceases to be a party and becomes a ritual sacrifice of common sense. Guests squeal with delight and disgust. Champagne is poured directly onto the wrestlers. Camera flashes blind the eyes. And Freddie? He isn't even smiling. He checks his watch. For him, this is simply the culmination of a show timed to the minute. He knows that tomorrow morning photos of these girls in liver will be on the desks of editors worldwide. He knows he will be called a monster. And this is exactly what he wants. Because monsters are feared, monsters are discussed, but monsters are never, do you hear, never forgotten. On this night, he killed good old rock and roll and gave birth to show business in its ugliest and most alluring guise. But the price to be paid for cleaning this hall in the morning would turn out to be higher than any check he had ever signed. When the hands of the clock in the Fairmont Hotel lobby slowly, as if reluctantly, crawled past 4 a.m., the music that had shaken the building's foundation for the last 6 hours suddenly cut off, and at that moment a silence of such density fell upon the ballroom that it seemed like a physical object, capable of crushing a human being. This was not the peaceful silence of dawn, when birds begin to sing and the city wakes up. No, this was the dead, vacuum silence of a battlefield after a nuclear strike. When the smoke clears and survivors begin to realize the scale of the catastrophe, you stand in the middle of this hall, and your ears, accustomed to the decibels of rock, ring, trying to adapt to the absence of sound. But what you hear instead of music scares you to the bone. You hear bubbles bursting in thousands of unfinished glasses of champagne left on tables, and this quiet hissing sound is like the death rattle of the party itself. The visual picture revealed in this silence could make any aesthete weep. Luxurious Persian rugs that yesterday cost a fortune now resembled a dirty mess soaked in wine, ash, and, yes, you aren't mistaken, blood from raw liver, which began to exude a sweet, nauseating smell of decomposition in the warm air of the room. You look at this mountain of meat in the center of the hall, which just an hour ago was an arena for model wrestling, and see how it has turned into a pile of biological waste over which the first flies, appearing from nowhere, are already circling. Looking at this, you ask yourself, where did all those beautiful people go? Those gods and goddesses who danced here? The answer lies right beneath your feet, literally. The floor is strewn with bodies. These aren't corpses, but they look like shipwreck victims. Businessmen in torn tuxedos sleep embracing drag queens whose wigs have slid sideways. Dwarves, the very ones who carried cocaine, are curled up under tables, covering themselves with tablecloths like children hiding from monsters. Makeup on the guests' faces has run, turning them into weeping clowns. And in this cold light of the duty lamps, turned on by the staff, all the magic of the night has vanished, exposing the ugly skeleton of reality. You think it can't get any worse? That this is rock bottom? But precisely at this moment, the doors of the hall burst open with a crash that sounds like a cannon shot in this silence, and a figure appears on the threshold, embodying the retribution of reality. It is the general manager of the hotel, a man in an impeccable suit who hasn't slept all night listening to complaints from guests on other floors. His face is crimson with rage, veins on his neck are bulging, and in his hands he clutches not just a folder, but a sentence. He enters the hall and his shoes crunch on broken glass. Crunch, 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 and every step brings him closer to the center of destruction. He sees the meat. He sees the stains on the walls. He sees what his pride, his elite hotel, has been turned into. Do you feel his anger? He is ready to call the police. He is ready to sue. He is ready to destroy the band queen, grind them into dust, hand them a bill they will be paying off for the rest of their days. He searches for the culprit with his eyes, expecting to find him wallowing in the dirt, drunk and helpless. And here the Santa Barbara effect kicks in, that psychological twist that makes you hold your breath. You, like this manager, expect to see Freddie Mercury crushed, sleeping face down in a salad, or fleeing through the back door like a cowardly schoolboy who caused trouble. But reality does a backflip. Out of the shadows, from the depth of the stage, Freddie walks out to meet the furious manager. He isn't sleeping. He isn't staggering. He doesn't even look tired. He is wearing the same black and white harlequin leotard, but now, in this morning light, it looks not like a jester's costume, but like a knight's armor. In his hand is a glass of water, His gaze is absolutely clear. He looks at the manager, who is choking with indignation and beginning to scream, listing the damages: ruined carpets, broken chandeliers, moral damages, the smell of meat that is impossible to remove. The manager screams about prison, about scandal, about how Queen will never cross the threshold of a decent establishment again. The silence of the hall is torn by his hysteria. And what does Freddie do? Do you expect him to start arguing, making excuses, shifting the blame to the organizers? No. Freddie performs the action of the legend. He waits exactly 1 second for the manager to inhale for a new tirade, and in this pause, calmly, with the grace of a monarch, he takes a checkbook and a gold pen from his pocket. He doesn't look at the destruction. He looks straight into the eyes of the man who wants to destroy him. The click of the pen cap in this silence sounds louder than a scream. Freddie places the checkbook on the nearest intact table, quickly signs his sweeping signature at the bottom of the page, tears out the check, and hands it to the manager. The manager freezes. He looks at the piece of paper. The signature is there, but there is no number. The amount line is empty. "Write in any number you deem necessary, darling," Freddie says in a voice containing not a drop of guilt, only light, condescending boredom. "But make sure it's enough for your maids to forget everything they saw here and bring me coffee." Do you understand what just happened? This wasn't an act of paying a bill. It was an act of total dominance. Freddie didn't just compensate for the damage. He bought the hotel. He bought the manager's conscience. He bought the staff's silence. And most importantly, he bought the right to behave like a god, for whom the laws of physics and economics are not written. The manager's face changes. Anger is replaced by confusion, and then fear. He holds a carte blanche in his hands, a check that can make him rich or get him fired if he goes too far. He realizes that before him is not just a rowdy musician. Before him is a man who understands the language of money better than any banker. Freddie turns and walks away, stepping over sleeping bodies and chunks of liver, not even looking back at the man with the check. In this morning silence, broken only by the manager's heavy breathing, it becomes clear. The party is over, but the myth has just been born. Freddie Mercury didn't run from responsibility. He simply took out his wallet and slapped reality in the face so hard that reality was forced to bow. This moment, when the blank check hung in the air between the hand of a rock star and the hand of a bureaucrat, became a watershed, after which Queen ceased to be just a band and turned into a corporation for manufacturing legends, where any sin can be washed away with ink on a bank slip. But the manager, watching Freddie's retreating back, did not yet know that this signature would become the most valuable autograph of his life, and that he had just sold his hotel's soul to a devil in a harlequin leotard. When the last check was signed, and the hotel manager, clutching the cherished piece of paper to his chest, disappeared into the bowels of the service rooms, the story of that night in New Orleans should have ended, turning into a hungover memory for a few hundred chosen ones. But it is here, in the rays of the cold November sun illuminating the ruins of the ballroom, that the mechanism of the intellectual orgasm begins to work, for the sake of which we started this story. You look at this scattered confetti, at the sleeping people, at the wine stains, and your gaze inevitably returns to that very dagger we introduced in the first act, to the butcher's bill for 200 pounds of raw beef liver. Do you still think it was an eccentric antic? A gastronomic whim? A supply error? Get ready, because the truth about this piece of meat will now flip your understanding of who Freddie Mercury really was. In the finale of that night, when the degree of madness reached the boiling point, a huge, specially constructed pit was indeed brought into the center of the hall, and to the hooting of the crowd, these 200 pounds of slimy, bloody substance were dumped into it. Why? To stage nude model wrestling in the mud? Yes, that's exactly how it looked to the drunken guests placing bets and throwing money into this bloody mess. But for Freddie, this wasn't just fun. It was the cruelest, most graphic, and most brilliant metaphor for show business an artist ever created. Look at this scene through the eyes of a sober man. Beautiful women, dreaming of fame, flounder in a pile of internal organs of slaughtered animals, while rich producers in tuxedos laugh and applaud, not noticing that blood splatters are staining their expensive lapels. Freddie Mercury, standing on his balcony, didn't just entertain the crowd, he held a mirror up to them. He told them without words, "Look at yourselves. You think you are the elite. You think you are creators of art? No, you are just pigs wallowing in offal, and I am the only one who dared to show you this literally." The liver was cheap. It spoiled quickly and began to stink, just like the fame all these people were chasing. This dagger shot straight into the heart of the industry. Freddie turned a glamorous party into a slaughterhouse to show the true price of success. And the irony was that none of the guests in the frenzy of fun even realized they were being laughed at, not with. But here arises a new question that gives you no peace. If this was so grandiose, so symbolic, then where is the evidence? We live in an era where every sneeze is documented. But why, when you Google Queen New Orleans Party, 1978, do you find only blurry black and white shots and a bunch of contradictory rumors? Where is the video? Where are the clear photos of those very dwarves with cocaine? And here the plot takes a sharp Santa Barbara-style turn that makes you feel the chill of a conspiracy theory. Do you think the evidence was lost? That the photographers were too drunk? No. Everything was much more complicated. The next morning, when the executives of the record company EMI saw the first developed films, they had a collective heart attack. They didn't see promotional materials for the album Jazz. They saw a criminal case. They saw a career-ending event. They saw materials that could send Queen to prison for drug distribution and violation of public morality in conservative America. And then the cleanup machine was launched. The label spent even more money than the party itself cost to buy up negatives, bribe photographers, and destroy evidence. Do you understand the paradox? Freddie wanted the world to see this debauchery. He wanted to shock the Puritans. But the corporate machine feeding from his hands got scared of the monster it had financed itself. They tried to sterilize the legend, leave only hints, only rumors. But it was this attempt to hide the truth that created a myth stronger than any reality. If we saw HD video from that party, we might have been horrified and forgotten. But because we were left with only scraps, our imagination painted a picture of such scale that even Caligula himself wouldn't have reached. The absence of evidence became the main proof that something beyond the pale was happening there. And herein lies the intellectual orgasm of the whole story. The album Jazz, for which all this was started, received devastating reviews. Critics, like Rolling Stone magazine, called Queen fascists and accused them of arrogance. Musically, it wasn't their strongest release, but who cared? The party in New Orleans sold this album better than any song. People went to stores not for the music. They went to buy a piece of that very forbidden, dirty, bloody night. They bought the vinyl, the insert of which, that very poster with naked cyclists, became iconic, hoping to touch the legend. Freddie Mercury proved that scandal is a currency that never devalues. However, standing among the ruins of the Fairmont Hotel, as the cleaners were already starting to rake the remains of liver and confetti into black bags, Freddie perhaps, for the first time, felt not triumph, but a strange, chilling emptiness. He looked at this chaos and realized he had hit the ceiling. There was nowhere further to go. He had taken the hedonism of the 70s to the absolute, chemically pure limit. He built a Tower of Babel out of vice, and it stood, but what to do next when you have already broken all commandments and bought all indulgences? This party became not just a celebration, it became a memorial service for a whole era. Freddie, without knowing it, threw a farewell ball for a decade of freedom. He danced on the deck of the Titanic, knowing the iceberg was close, but no one else saw the ice yet. In the air, saturated with the smell of meat and expensive perfume, the premonition of an imminent end already hovered. the end of the 70s, the end of impunity, and the beginning of a new, terrible era that would come with an unknown virus and force all these people to pay bills that could not be closed with a blank check. But for now, the sun was just rising over New Orleans, and the world was still sleeping, not knowing that on this night, rock and roll lost its innocence forever, turning from music of rebellion into an industry of spectacles, where even human liver is just a prop. The music cuts off not on a solemn chord, but abruptly, as if someone pulled the cord from the socket, and the screen plunges into darkness, leaving you alone with a hollow echo in your ears and Freddie Mercury's face slowly dissolving into the shadows. But don't rush to close this page, because the most important thing happens not during the party, but after the lights go out. You probably think that in the morning, the guests simply took aspirin, washed off the remains of other people's lipstick and blood, and life returned to normal, but you are making a fatal mistake, underestimating the scale of that tectonic shift that occurred that night. The hangover after Halloween, 1978, at the Fairmont Hotel lasted not one morning. It stretched for a whole decade, and the consequences of that orgy echo in culture to this day, forcing us to ask questions that are scary to answer. Let's look at the ruins. When the cleaners finally swept away the last confetti and carried out the bags of that rotting liver, Queen woke up in a new reality. Do you think the press admired their courage? Oh no. American critics, those self-proclaimed guardians of morality, declared a holy war on the band. Rolling Stone magazine came out with a review accusing the band of fascist arrogance and calling their music a soundtrack for degenerates. Bible Belt, radio stations, began an unspoken boycott. It would seem this is the end. The career should have collapsed under the weight of public censure. But here triggers that very paradox that breaks logic. The louder the moralists screamed, the faster the album, Jazz disappeared from store shelves. Freddie proved that hate sells as well as love, and the record's platinum status became the best way to give the finger to the establishment. But behind this commercial triumph lay a darkness no one noticed in the glare of the strobe lights. That night in New Orleans became not just a party, it became a memorial service for the 70s. Do you feel this chill down your spine? Freddie and his guests danced on the edge of a volcano that was already starting to erupt. It was the last breath of an era of absolute, uncontrolled sexual freedom, an era when pleasure had no consequences, and no didn't exist in the rock star dictionary. They feasted during a plague that had not yet received its name, but was already standing on the threshold, holding a scythe in a bony hand. Look at these archival frames again, but now through the prism of knowledge of the future. These beautiful, sweaty, intertwined bodies, this mountain of meat, this exchange of fluids. Today it looks not like a celebration of life, but like a dance of death. Within a few years, many of those who were in that hall would start disappearing. First in whispers, then in obituaries. The virus, which no one knew about in 1978, would come to present the bill for this banquet, and the price would turn out to be exorbitant even for Freddie Mercury's checkbook. And here arises the Santa Barbara effect, flipping your perception upside down. Did you think Freddie was a hedonist who just wanted to have fun? No. Looking back, we realize that he intuitively felt the end approaching. His madness in New Orleans was an attempt to drink this life, to the dregs, before the cup was taken away. He burned the candle at both ends, not because he was foolish, but because he wanted the flame to be so bright that its reflection would remain on humanity's retina forever, even when darkness fell. He turned his life into a performance where even dirt became gold, and debauchery became art. But let's return to that very dagger, the bill for 200 pounds of liver. This piece of paper became a symbol, not only of that night, but of the entire entertainment industry. Years later, when rock and roll becomes sterile, corporate, and safe, when stars are afraid to sneeze without a PR agent's approval, the legend of Queen's beef party will become a myth hard to believe. People will tell stories about dwarves with cocaine like a grim fairy tale for adults. And herein lies the main irony. Freddie wanted to show the ugliness of the industry by throwing models into meat, but instead of disgust, he evoked envy in descendants. We look at this madness from our safe, filtered world and catch ourselves on the shameful thought, damn it, I would give everything to spend at least 5 minutes there. Now that the smoke has cleared and the music has died down completely, the main question stands before us, which will divide you into 2 camps, and I want you to answer it honestly, without hypocrisy. Look at the scales of history. On one pan is absolute freedom, bordering on self-destruction, art that knows no boundaries and morality, and the ability to live as if tomorrow will never come. On the other pan is responsibility, safety, respect for human dignity, and the understanding that for every pleasure, one has to pay with health and reputation. Who was Freddie Mercury that night? Was he a great artist provocateur who gave the world a last gulp of true freedom, turning a party into an act of high art, albeit dirty? Or was he an arrogant decadent throwing a feast during a plague, exploiting people for his ego and creating a monument to human baseness, for which we should be ashamed? Where is that fine line between legend and filth? Is the bill for raw liver proof of his genius or evidence of his moral decline? Do we admire this, or are we horrified? Go down to the comments right now. I don't want to see banal phrases like Queen is a legend. I want to see your struggle. Whose side are you on in this battle between Puritanism and chaos? Write one word, art or filth, and explain why you think so, because this dispute about that night in New Orleans is actually a dispute about what is permitted to us humans and where the party ends and hell begins. I will be waiting for your verdict.